Hello everyone, this is John. We're reading Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain by Betty Edwards. The imaginary picture plane, a mental construct. Like Van Gogh and Holbein, we are using an actual picture plane, but once you have learned the process, you will discard the actual plane for an imaginary plane. The concept of the imaginary or mental picture plane is abstract and somewhat difficult to explain. But the concept is one of the most important keys to learning to draw, so stay with me. In your mind's eye, see this, the picture plane as an imaginary transparent plane, like a framed window that is always hanging in front of the artist's face, always parallel to the plane of the artist's two eyes. If the artist turns, the plane also turns. What the artist sees on the plane actually extends back into the distance. But the plane enables the artist to see the scene as though it were magically smashed flat on the back of the clear glass plane, like a photograph, in a sense. Put another way, the 3D view behind the framed window is converted to a 2D flat image on the plane. The artist then copies what is seen on the plane onto the flat drawing paper. The flat drawing paper and the flattened image on the plane are thought of as one and the same, and the artist's task is to transfer the image on the plane to the paper. The result is a realistic drawing. This trick of the artist's mind, so difficult to describe in words, is even more difficult for beginning students to discover on their own. And I think it is one of the reasons that learning to draw requires teaching. In this course, your actual plastic picture plane and actual window frames, or the viewfinders, are devices that seem to work like magic to enable students to get what drawing is, that is, to understand the fundamental nature of drawing perceived objects or persons. To further help beginners in drawing, I ask you to draw crosshairs on your sheet of plastic, the plastic picture plane. These two grid lines represent vertical and horizontal, the constants on which the artist absolutely depends to assess relationships. Early in my teaching, I used a grid of many lines, but I found that students were counting up 2 spaces over and 3 down. This is just kind of L mode activity we didn't want. I reduced the grid lines to 1 vertical and 1 horizontal and found that that was sufficient. Later on, you will need neither the plastic picture paint with its grid lines nor the viewfinders. You will replace these technical devices with the imaginary, internalized mental picture plane that every artist uses. Whether consciously or subconsciously, the actual plane, your plastic picture plane, and the actual viewfinders are simply very effective aids during the time you are learning how to draw. Try this. Clip your large viewfinder to your picture plane. Close one eye and hold the picture plane or / viewfinder up in front of your face. Look at whatever framed image is in front of your eye. You can change the composition by bringing the picture plane closer to or further away from your face, much as a camera viewfinder works. Check out the angles of the edges of the ceiling or perhaps of a table relative to the crosshairs, relative to vertical and horizontal. These angles may surprise you. Next, imagine that you are drawing with your felt tip marker what you see on the plane, just as you did drawing your hand. Then turn to see another view, and then another, always keeping the picture plane parallel to the front of your face and closing one eye to convert 3D to 2D on the plane. Now put down the picture plane, close one eye, and try using the imaginary picture plane, adjusting your seeing to the mindset of the artist at work. One more important point. Drawing means drawing a single view. Recall that when you drew your hand directly on the plastic picture plane, I asked you to keep your posing hand still and your head still in order to see one view only on the picture plane. Even a slight movement of your posing hand or a slight change in the position of your head will give you a different view of your hand. I sometimes see students bend their heads to the side in order to see something they couldn't see with their head in the original position. Don't do it. If you can't see that fourth finger, you don't draw it. To repeat, keep your hand and your head in an unchanged position and draw just what you see. For the same reason, to see one view only. You kept one eye closed. By closing one eye, you removed binocular vision and slight variance in images called binocular disparity that occurs when we view an object with both eyes open. Binocular vision, sometimes called depth perception, allows us to see the world as three-dimensional. When you close one eye, the single image is two-dimensional. That is, it's flat like a photograph and therefore can be copied onto flat paper. You may be wondering, is it always necessary to close one eye while drawing? Not always, but most artists do quite a lot of one eye closing while drawing. The closer the viewed object, the more eye closing. The further away the object, the less eye closing, because binocular disparity diminishes with distance. And here we arrive at yet another of the many paradoxes of drawing. The flat, two-dimensional image that you saw and drew with one eye closed, directly on the picture plane, when copied onto your drawing paper, miraculously looks three-dimensional to the person who views your drawing. One necessary step in learning to draw is to believe that this miracle will happen. Often students struggling with a drawing will ask, how can I make this finger look like it's curving towards me? Or, how do I make this table look like it's going back in space? The answer, of course, is to draw, to copy, just what you see flattened on the picture plane. Only then will the drawing convincingly depict these movements through three-dimensional space. Why draw? The idea that basic realistic drawing is copying what is seen on the picture plane may seem simplistic to you. If that is so, you may object. Why not just take a photograph? One answer is that the purpose of realistic drawing is not simply to record data, but rather to record your unique perception, how you personally see something, and moreover, how you understand the thing you are drawing. By slowing down and closely observing something personal, personal expression and comprehension occur in ways that cannot occur simply by taking a snapshot. I am referring, of course, to casual photography, not the work of artist photographers. Also, your style of line, choices for emphasis, and subconscious mental processes, your personality, so to speak, enter the drawing. In this way, again, paradoxically, your careful observation and depiction of your subject give the viewer both the image of your subject and an insight into you. In the best sense, you will have expressed yourself in a uniquely human activity that has its origin in our remote prehistoric past. The next step, modified contour drawing and your first fully realized drawing. What you will need: your plastic picture plane with your felt tip marker drawing of your hand, your pad of drawing paper, your graphite stick, and some paper napkins or paper towels, your number 2 writing pencil and your 4B drawing pencil sharpened, your 3 erasers, an hour of uninterrupted time. Before you begin, please read through all the instructions. In this drawing, we are modifying the instructions for pure contour drawing. You will sit in a normal position and therefore be able to glance at your drawing to monitor its progress. Nevertheless, I hope you will use the same focused concentration that you used in pure contour drawing. Tape a stack of several sheets of paper to your drawing board. Tape all four corners securely so that the paper will not shift. One of your hands will be posing and must remain still. The other will be drawing and perhaps erasing. If the paper shifts under the hand while you're drawing or erasing, it is very distracting. Number 2, draw a format line on your drawing paper using the inside edge of your viewfinder as a template. 3, the next step is to tone your paper. Make sure you have a stack of several sheets of paper to pad your drawing. Begin to tone your paper by rubbing the edge of your graphite stick very lightly over the paper, staying inside the format line. You want to achieve a pale, even tone. Don't worry too much about staying within the lines. You can clean up the edges at a later time. 4, once you have covered the paper with a light application of graphite, begin to rub the graphite into the paper with your paper towel. Rub with a circular motion, applying even pressure right up to the edge of the format line. You want to achieve a very smooth, silvery tone. Next, lightly draw horizontal and vertical crosshairs on your toned paper. The lines will cross in the center just as they do on your plastic picture plane. Use the crosshairs on the plastic plane to make the position of the crosshairs on the format of your toned paper. Don't make the lines too dark. They are only guidelines to late, and later you may want to eliminate them. Number 6, retrieve your picture plane with the felt tip drawing that you did at the start of the section. Or if you wish, do a new drawing. Then place the plane on a light surface, perhaps a sheet of paper, so that you can clearly see the drawing on the plastic. This image will act as a guide for you when you next draw your hand on the paper. An important next step, you will transfer the main points and edges of your drawing on plastic to your drawing paper. The formats are the same size, so it's 1-to-1 scale transfer. Using the crosshairs, locate a point where an edge of your hand drawing contacts a crosshair. Transfer several of these points. Then begin to connect the edges of your hand, fingers, thumb, palm, creases, and so on with the points you have established. This is just a light sketch to help you place the hand within the format. Recall that drawing is copying what you see on the picture plane. For this drawing, you will take this actual step in order to get used to the process. If you have to correct a line, don't worry about erasing the ground. Erase, then just rub the erased area with your finger or paper towel or tissue, and the eraser disappears. A toned ground is very forgiving of erasers. Number 8. Once this rough light sketch is on your paper, you are ready to start drawing. 9. Set aside your drawing on plastic, but place it where you can still refer to it. Reposition your posing hand using the drawing on plastic to guide the positioning. Then, closing one eye, focus on a point on some edge in your posing hand. Any edge will do. Place your pencil point on this same point in the drawing. Then gaze again at this point on your hand in preparation to draw. This will start the mental shift to the R mode and help quiet any objections from the L mode. When you begin to draw, your eyes, or rather eye, will move slowly along the contour, and your pencil will record your perceptions at the same slow speed that your eye is moving, just as you did in pure contour drawing. Try to perceive and record all the slight undulations of each edge. Use your eraser whenever needed, even to make tiny adjustments in the line. Looking at your hand with one eye closed, remember, you can estimate the angle of any edge by comparing it to the crosshairs. Check these angles in your drawing on plastic that you did earlier, but also try to see these relationships by imagining a picture plane hovering over your hand with its helpful crosshairs and the edge of the format to guide you. 12. About 90% of the time, you should be looking at your hand. That is where you will find the information that you need. In fact, all the information you need to do a wonderful drawing of your hand is right in front of your eyes. Glance at the drawing only to monitor the pencil's recording of your perceptions, to check for relationships of sizes and angles, or to pick a point to start a new contour. Concentrate on what you see, wordlessly sensing to yourself. How wide is this part compared to that? How steep is this angle compared to that? And so on. 13. Move from contour to adjacent contour. If you see spaces between the fingers, use that information as well. How wide is that space compared to the width of the shape? Remember, we are not naming things. Fingernails, fingers, thumb, palm, they are all just edges, spaces, shapes, relationships. Be sure to keep one eye closed at least a good portion of the time. Your hand is quite close to your eyes. And the binocular disparity can confuse you with two images when you come to parts that impose their names on you. Fingernails, for example, try to escape the words. One good strategy is to focus on the shape of the flesh around the finger. These shapes are edges with the fingernails. Therefore, if you draw the shape around the nails, you will have also drawn the edge of the fingernails, but you'll get both right. In fact, if mental conflict sets in over any part of the drawing, move the next adjacent space or shape, remembering the shared edge concept. Then return later with new eyes to the part that seemed difficult. You may want to erase the spaces around your hand. This makes the hand stand out from the negative space. You can work up the drawing with a little shading by observing what you see. Areas of light or highlights and areas of shadow appear on your posing hand. Erase the highlights and darken the shadows. 15. Finally, when the drawing begins to become intensely interesting, like a complicated and beautiful puzzle gradually taking shape under your pencil, you will be deep in the R mode and really drawing. After you have finished, this is your first real drawing, and I can assume with some confidence that you are pleased with the results. I hope you now see what I meant about the miracle of drawing, because you drew what you saw on the flat picture plane. Your drawing appears authentically three-dimensional. Furthermore, some very subtle qualities will show in your drawing. For example, a sense of the volume, the three-dimensional thickness of the hand will be there, as well as the precise effort of folding the pose or the slight pressure of a finger on the thumb. And all of this comes from simply drawing what you see on the plane. In the group of drawings on page 106 and 7, some are student drawings, some are demonstration drawings by instructors. In all the drawings, the hands are three-dimensional. Believable and authentic, they seem to be made of flesh, muscles, skin, and bones. Again, very subtle qualities are depicted, such as the tension of certain muscles or the precise texture of the skin. Notice also the individuality of styles of drawing. Before we move on to the next step, think back on your mental state during the drawing of your hand. Did you lose track of time? Did the drawing at some point become interesting, even fascinating? Did you experience any distraction from your verbal mode? If so, how did you escape it? Also, think back on this basic conception of the picture plane and your working definition of drawing. or copying what you see on the picture plane. From now on, each time you pick up the pencil to draw, the strategies learned in this drawing will become better integrated and more automatic. It will be helpful to do a second modified contour drawing of your hand, perhaps this time holding some complex object, a twisted handkerchief, a flower, a pine cone, a pair of eyeglasses. For this drawing, you can again work on a lightly toned ground, or you might try a line drawing without the toned ground. Remember, as in learning any skill, the more you practice, the faster those new neural maps in your brain will become permanent. The next step, tricking the L mode with empty space. So far, we have found several ways to set aside the dominant left hemisphere. It has problems with mirror images, the vase/faces drawing, and refuses to deal with the upside down information, the drawing of Stravinsky. It rejects ultra slow, complex perceptions, pure and modified contour drawing. The next lesson on negative space expands our main strategy and restores the compositional unity of early childhood art. And that is the end of chapter 6. And I have some time, we can keep going. Chapter 7, Perceiving Spaces. This is Vincent van Gogh, Digger, 1885. In this drawing, Vincent van Gogh strongly emphasizes negative spaces, especially near the figure. Notice how varied and interesting the spaces are, how essentially simple they are, and how they unify the figure with the ground. The second basic component skill of drawing, the perception of negative space, is new learning for most of our students in pure joy because of its antic, whimsical quality. In a sense, you will be seeing and drawing what is not there in order to portray what is there. Realizing the importance of spaces is rare in American life. We tend to focus on objects. We are objective culture. In other cultures, many Asian cultures, for example, working within the spaces is common practice and well understood. My aim is to make spaces become as real for you as are positive forms, and to provide a new experience in seeing and drawing. Negative spaces and positive forms. Two terms traditionally used in art are negative spaces and positive forms. The word negative is a bit unfortunate because it carries a negative connotation. I've searched in vain for a better term, so we'll stick with this one. The two terms have the advantage of being easy to remember, and after all, are commonly used in the whole field of art and design. An analogy to clarify the concept of negative spaces. In drawing, negative spaces are real. They are not just the empty parts. The following analogy may help you see that. Imagine that you are watching a Bugs Bunny cartoon. Imagine that Bugs Bunny is running at top speed down a long hallway, at the end of which is a closed door. He smashes through the door, leaving a Bugs Bunny-shaped hole in the door. What is left of the door is negative space. Note that the door has an outside edge. This edge is the outside edge of the negative space. Its format. The hole in the door is, or was, the positive form of Bugs Bunny, now gone. Poof. The point of the analogy is that negative spaces in drawings are just as solid, just as important as the positive forms. For the person just learning to draw, they are perhaps more important because negative spaces makes drawings difficult. Let me explain. In the last chapter, you learned that edges are shared. The edges of the positive forms share edges with the negative spaces. If you draw one, you will have to also draw the other. In the drawing of the bighorn sheep, for example, the sheep is the positive form in the sky behind and ground below. The sheep is the positive form, and the sky behind and ground below the animal are the negative spaces. The first drawing, figure 7-1, is focused on the sheep. The second and third on the negative spaces. In drawing the sheep, a hard part would be drawing the horns, which are foreshortened and curve off into space in unexpected ways that make the horns difficult to see and draw. Another hard part would be the arrangement of the legs in the foreshortened view of the animal. What to do? Don't draw the horns or the legs at all. Close one eye, focus on the negative spaces of the horns and the legs. Draw those. And you get the horns and legs for free. Moreover, you will get them right because you have no names for those shapes, no pre-existing symbols to rush in, and no knowledge of why they are the way they are. They are just shapes. This is where the joy and whimsy of negative spaces comes in. Using the unlikely and unexpected method, you will be able to draw the most difficult forms. Drawings that will cause viewers to wonder, how did you make that look so real? A person experienced in drawing is always ignoring the hard parts and drawing the easy parts, the negative spaces, thereby getting difficult positive forms as free gifts. This method, of course, fits our main strategy for easing the left brain out of the task. Finding you focused on nothing and then drawing nothing. The L mode says, in effect, I do not deal with nothing. It isn't anything. If you are going to keep on with that, I'm out of it. End quote. Excellent, just what we want. To the R mode, it makes no difference. Negative spaces or positive forms, it is all interesting, and more unusual the shape, the better. The cognitive battle of perception. Figures 7.4 and 7.5 show an interesting graphic record of a student's mental struggle and its resolution in two drawings of a cart and projector. In the first drawing, the student had great difficulty reconciling his stored knowledge of what the objects were supposed to look like with what he actually saw. Notice the signs of mental struggle throughout the drawing, along with the signs of surrender to verbal knowledge. The legs of the cart are all the same length, and the same symbol is used for all the wheels, even though they are in different positions. When the student shifted to drawing only the shape of the negative spaces, he was far more successful. The visual information apparently came through clearly. The drawing looks confident and as though it was done with ease, and in fact it was done with ease, because using negative spaces enables one to escape the mental crunch that occurs when perceptions don't match conceptions. It's not that the visual information gathered by regarding spaces rather than the objects is really less complex or is in any way easier to draw. The spaces, after all, shared edges with the forms. By focusing on the spaces, we free the R mode from the domination of the L mode. Put another way, by focusing on information that does not suit the style of the verbal system, we cause the job to be shifted to the mode appropriate for seeing and drawing what is really out there. Thus, the conflict ends, and in R mode, the brain processes spatial relational information with ease. Besides making drawing easier, why is learning to see and draw negative spaces important? In Chapter 5, we saw that young children have strong grasp of the importance of the bounding edge of the paper. This strong awareness of the format controls the way they distribute form and space. And young children often produce nearly flawless compositions. A composition by a 6-year-old in Figure 7-7 compares favorably with Spanish artist Joan Miro's composition in Figure 7-6. As you have seen, this ability unfortunately lapses as children approach adolescence, perhaps due to lateralization and the left hemisphere's penchant for recognizing, naming, and categorizing things. Concentration on single objects seems to supersede the young child's more holistic or global view of the world, where everything is important, including the negative spaces of the sky, ground, and air. Usually it takes years of training to convince students in the way experienced artists are convinced that negative spaces bounded by the format require the same degree of attention and care that positive forms require. Beginning students generally lavish all their attention on the objects, persons, or forms in their drawings, and then more or less fill in the background. It may seem hard to believe at this moment, but if care and attention are lavished on the negative spaces, the forms will take care of themselves, and your composition will be immensely strengthened. Defining composition. In art, the term composition means the way an artist arranges the key elements of the artwork. The positive shapes, the objects or persons, and negative spaces, the empty areas, within the format. To compose a work, the artist starts by first deciding on the shape of the format, and then places and fits together the positive shapes and the negative spaces within the format with the goal of unifying the composition. The importance of composing shapes and spaces within the format. The format controls composition. Put another way, the shape of the drawing surface, most often rectangular, will greatly influence how an artist distributes the shapes and spaces within the bounding edge of that surface. To clarify this, use your R mode ability to image a tree, let's say a Christmas tree, and fit it into each of the formats in Figure 7-8. You will find that the shape nicely fits one or two of the formats, but is still wrong for the others. In this course, in order to simplify instruction, you are using one format only, a familiar vertical rectangle that is approximately the shape of ordinary bond paper. The format is repeated in your picture plane, viewfinder, and drawing pad of paper. This particular format, which varies only in size, is suitable for all the exercises, but later on you will enjoy experimenting with other formats. Experienced artists fully comprehend the importance of the shape of the format. Beginning drawing students, however, are often curiously oblivious to the shape of the paper and the boundaries of the format, because their attention is directed almost exclusively towards the objects or persons they are drawing. They seem to regard the edges of the paper almost as non-existent, almost like the real spaces that surrounds objects and has no bounds. This causes problems with the composition for nearly all beginning art students. For this reason, I suggest that you always start a drawing by first using a viewfinder to decide on a composition, then drawing a format on your paper using one of the viewfinders or the outside edge of your picture plane as a template. In this way, you focus your attention on the bounding edges of the format before starting to draw. And I think that's a good place to stop. We are almost 900 bars on GarageBand, so I will see you next time. We'll be back soon.